Come on, two, Well, good morning and welcome to the Broadcast Retirement Network's new program, BRN Weekly. This show recaps the week that was in retirement, markets, technology, and so much more. And it also takes a look back at some of our best interviews on the network. In future episodes, I'll be joined by a guest or a contributor to help me along the way. This week, our Social Media Monday featured LinkedIn's Devin Banerjee discussing how much millennials need to save for retirement. 40% seems like a lot of money. Let's take a look.
So speaking of Halloween, this was a really scary story we featured last week. It's some new research out of MIT, an economist there named James Poturba. And the headline takeaway is that our assumptions about how much young people should be saving for retirement really need to be rethought. And the bar needs to be raised. So today you hear, in the range of 15%, for example, of every paycheck should go to a retirement saving account like a 401k. Poturba really says those assumptions need to change. So he wrote this paper, Retirement Security in an Aging Society. And really the point is that society is aging very, very fast. So in 1950, here in the US, the share of people over the age of 65 was about 8%. In 2050, it's projected to be about 21%. So society is really aging. The previous generation had things like Social Security, defined benefit plans or pension plans. And what we've seen, obviously, over this generation is the share of responsibility for retirement security has really shifted to the individual. And the assumptions that really need to be rethought, one is that is investment returns, for example, the past decade or so has been able to enjoy 10% annual historical returns, even more than the past decade. Those are projected really to come down. Economists at Vanguard say about 3 to 5% on average. That's before inflation. If you look at a real return after the cost of inflation, you're looking at about 1 to 2%. So that assumption really needs to change. The other is obviously Social Security. That reliance on that program will go down in the future if Congress doesn't make really rapid changes, in the next few years. And so, basically what the takeaway is here is, that old phrase, "I'll work until I'm dead," is really becoming more and more of a reality. And it's the situation's quite scary here in the U.S., especially if people assume that they are going to retire at 65. That's really one of the assumptions in this paper, which if you look at surveys, people still think that that's the norm, even as people live longer. So I think that will also need to change as this generation reaches that age. If you think about pensions and others that have a hurdle to meet their payouts of 8% on investment returns, historically they've achieved that, and they think they can still achieve that largely using those alternative types of assets. So outside of stocks and bonds, things like real estate, private equity, and infrastructure, energy and natural resources, other strategies like that. Here in the U.S., because of regulation, those illiquid type assets are not really allowed in traditional retirement plans or DC plans, 401k plans, for example. Obviously the alternative asset management industry is trying to change that. And for many of them, it is an asset gathering exercise. But I think it's something that people should study and pay attention to, and those in the position to change policy, so policymakers should certainly look at that. Because to your point, the private pension plans have been able to achieve those type of returns with that larger diversification in the past.
Well, thanks, Devin. And also this week, we sat down with Natalie Walters. She's a digital reporter who's pursuing her master's degree in investigative journalism. She moved from New York to Phoenix, Arizona. That's a huge move. What did she think about when making the move? What are some of the biggest changes she's had to adapt to? Let's take a look.
I have been covering, sort of businessy topics for about 3.5 years. I was at Business Insider, then The Street, and then The Motley Fool. But I definitely noticed there's, obviously a tendency to go for the shorter articles. And I felt like there was always another step I could take in those articles, but I felt like I didn't have the skills I needed to do some of that. I'm talking about skills like knowing how to read financial documents really, really well and what to look for when something's off and how to get information from the government, how to find good investigative stories. And so I found this program at ASU and it really all fell into place so nicely. I couldn't have asked for it to work out better. So I wanted to develop my skills as an investigative journalist. I wanted to be able to take stories a step further and to help myself stand out as a journalist. When I graduated in 2015, I said I will never go back to school. I was done with it, and also as a journalist, I didn't feel like it would ever be worth it for me. I know for a lot of other jobs it would be, or sometimes it's required, but I think for journalists it's a lot about doing, so I didn't think I'd ever do it. But then I just started feeling inadequate with my degree and in what I knew, as I kind of rose up further and started working on other stories and just talking to sources that were continually, higher educated than I was. And I just felt I was lacking and I wanted to beef up my skills and my knowledge. And so that's when I started looking into programs. And I think I probably looked for a year before I actually committed to one. I think if I had found this program at the beginning, I may have been too scared to do it. But because I had been looking and adjusting myself to the idea of going back to school, leaving New York, leaving a steady job, it was much easier for me to accept. And then it just also felt right. I think also if I had spoken to the admissions people here and other students and I'd gotten, iffy feelings or like it's okay, I don't think I would have dropped everything to come here, on the other side of the United States. But I mean, it was a perfect fit. When I talked with them the first time, I explained my qualms with journalism and how I was frustrated at, the bipartisan of it all and, the strong left, the strong right in the agenda. And I felt like I didn't know who to trust, when I just want to know what's happening at the border, or I just want to know what's happening at Facebook. I just want to know the basics.
Right.
And I felt like I was having a hard time finding that. And the people here felt the same way. And they said that's part of the reason they started this program. So it just really fit in great. I only moved to Georgia to move here. I kind of dropped my stuff off at my family's house. I was there just kind of a few weeks before I came out here. So yeah, it's definitely way different. Honestly, it's been amazing. I think I loved New York. It'd always be one of my favorite cities, but I had heard someone say when I moved there's a 3-year itch, and I definitely got that 3-year itch. About 3 years, I still loved it, but I was thinking I'm a little tired of how unreliable the subway is. I'm a little tired also of just how hard it is to get to each other's apartments to hang out. I felt like I was lacking the community I'd had in previous years just because it's hard to meet up people. And so then you end up just meeting at a bar, and I just never feel like I have as much fun or get to know people as well there versus an apartment where you can play games and just sort of let loose. So that was something I was missing, and I love being here because I have a car again, which is great.
Right.
And so I already feel like that community I was missing has come back into my life and more so. And, these 19 people are just so supportive and we hang out all the time. I won't say hang out all the time. It's more like we're working all the time, but together.
Sure. Working groups.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We don't have that much time to hang out, but, so yeah, that's been great. Also I was going to say there's a light rail here, which is their subway, and it runs so well. And some people here, think when it's 2 minutes late that's a big deal. And I just want to say, you have no idea.
Yeah.
In New York, it would be, this subway isn't running for the day, or this is an hour late, or, they would change routes. Like the R train's now running on the N line all day long. It would be that.
Well, great stories all around. Natalie, best of luck to you. And when we come back, last month we talked to the state treasurer of Utah, and New York Times columnist Carrie Hannon. You won't want to miss these great interviews as we look back, so stay tuned right here on BRN. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. You know, financial literacy isn't just a buzzword to the state of Utah. They've had a financial literacy program in place for over 10 years. You know, I recently sat down with Treasurer David Dampton to discuss financial literacy, the program the state rolled out, and also the National Association of State Treasurers. Let's have a look.
That's right. I suspect if you went back 15 or 20 years ago, the National Association of State Treasurers was probably organized very strictly and simply around debt management. Of course, we issue tax-exempt municipal bonds, pension and banking and so forth. Financial literacy has become a major, major part of what we do. And it's really, as you can appreciate, in response to what's happening in this country. There's just such a great and growing need for not only better financial literacy, but better financial behaviors. And treasurers are taking note. What we're doing here in Utah, I think, is very similar to what's happening in other states. We're really building out new departments within our offices to put resources to work and to do what we can within our various states, working together to solve the problem. And the focus goes from K to gray, really, is what we talk about. So much of what we're doing at NAS this year is focused on K to 12 and things that can be done through the public school system. As you know, here in Utah, we've had a graduation requirement, a general financial literacy graduation requirement for over 10 years. And the National Association of State Treasurers adopted a resolution this year promoting the passage of legislation and or the creation of such graduation requirements in all the states. There is, and I think that most states have that collaboration or partnership. We certainly have it here in Utah. As you know, financial institutions have a focus here. I mean, if you're a bank, if you're a Fidelity or a Vanguard, you want financially healthy consumers. And so there's certainly a focus and has been for quite some time in the private sector with financial institutions and also, of course, nonprofits. And I think our focus is ensuring that we're not reinventing the wheel. And so the key is collaboration, understanding who's out there doing what, and trying to make sure that we're synergizing and working together to help solve the problem. And that's really a focus for us here in Utah and around the country as state treasurers.
Well, thanks, David. Some great work being done by you and the state of Utah, as well as the National Association of State Treasurers. Keep it up. And in our last segment, I sat down with Carrie Hannon, columnist for the New York Times, entrepreneur, and financial and aging expert, to discuss selecting and finding a financial advisor. What were some of the criteria? Let's take a look.
There's so many different letters of the alphabet off of people at the end of people's names these days that you're kind of like, whoa, what does even all of that mean? What do I really need? But the most important thing we need to tell people is that, and I constantly say this, managing your finances doesn't have to be really complicated, but you also do not need to go alone. You don't have to do it by yourself. There are some great advisors. I work with an advisor. It's really important, no matter how knowledgeable you are, to have somebody who can look at the big picture for you and give you some unbiased, sort of take the emotion out of it. And I'm going to say, number one, though, I am a big fan of the CFP. I think if you look for no other designation, having someone who is a certified financial planner is really a great starting point, because that is someone who has said that they are a fiduciary. And that's a big word, but it's not really. What it means is that they put your interests first. A no-brainer, but not every advisor does that. And not every advisor has signed that agreement that is what they're doing. So the CFP board is really critical. And if you go, I know you don't think it's, as selective, but it's a good starting point for you. That is great advice. I mean, brokercheck.org for sure. Check that out while you're doing your homework before you, and the cfp.net is where you can search for somebody in your area by zip code. There's but it's important. There's a list. I have a book called Money Confidence out, but you don't have to go to my book, but there are questions you need to ask a potential advisor, and you need to interview a couple. Remember, you're hiring them for a job. So put yourself in that position. Pretend like you're interviewing them, not necessarily they're interviewing you, although there are some good questions they should be asking you. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about how your assets. It's about who you are. What's your holistic view? What are you looking for in your life? What are some of your ambitions and goals? They need to know all about you. They need to know about your career. It's not just about how much money you have saved or investable.
And that wraps up our first episode of BRN Weekly. Hope you found it very helpful and educational. Also, check out the Weekly Pulse, which wraps up all the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance for the entire week as well. And don't forget, tomorrow, we've got the BRN Sunday podcast, where members of the media, academia, and financial services analyze the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, and more. You're not going to want to miss it. So until Monday, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving. And don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired of the same